dear listener, to Sleepy Story Facts, where tonight's sleep story opens like a slow silver curtain across the calmest corner of space, and where this bedtime story invites you to drift gently toward rest as we begin our long, soothing journey through 100 of the most relaxing facts about Mercury, the smallest planet in our solar family, a world of soft sunlight, ancient stone, and astonishing temperature swings, all told in a relaxing story designed to help you fall asleep with ease, to soften your thoughts, and to guide you toward deep sleep through calming narration and a gentle bedtime rhythm that asks nothing of you now except that you settle, breathe, and let the day grow pleasantly distant before we float any closer. Allow yourself 2 quiet minutes simply to arrive here, as if you were laying a warm blanket over your mind. Let your jaw unclench, let your shoulders sink, let the small muscles around your eyes become loose and untroubled, and imagine that each breath is a slow tide rolling across a moonlit shore, coming in without urgency, leaving without effort, while above you the heavens are not vast and sharp, but velvety and kind, and every star seems wrapped in hush. If there is a thought still fluttering at the edge of your attention, you do not have to chase it away. Just let it perch for a moment and then watch it grow still, because this nighttime story is not here to excite the mind, only to cradle it. And in that cradle, we begin to approach Mercury, a planet so near the sun, and yet so often overlooked, as if it were a quiet little lantern placed close to great fire. Humble in size, modest in presence, and full of beautiful scientific wonder, Mercury is the smallest of the 8 planets, only a little larger than Earth's moon, and that alone gives it a tender quality in the imagination, as though the solar system, in all its grandeur, had kept one tiny polished stone close to the center for safekeeping. It travels around the sun more quickly than any other planet, completing 1 year in just 88 Earth days. And yet, on Mercury, a single day, measured from one sunrise to the next, lasts much longer than its year, creating a strange and dreamy rhythm in which time itself seems to yawn, stretch, and fold over softly. You may imagine yourself now drifting high above its horizon, not in a rush, not in a mission, but in a state of peaceful observation, as if you were carried by invisible hands through a silent observatory of the cosmos, where every crater is a bowl of shadow and light. Every plane is a page from an old and patient history, and every detail encourages your breathing to become slower. Mercury has almost no atmosphere in the way Earth does, no thick blue air to soften the sunlight, no weather like rain or drifting snow. And because of that, the planet experiences some of the greatest temperature changes in the solar system, becoming fiercely hot in daylight and unimaginably cold in darkness, which sounds dramatic when spoken quickly, but here in our gentle telling becomes simply another example of how a small world can hold enormous contrasts without losing its quiet dignity. Think of it not as a harsh place, but as a place of balance between extremes, a world where heat and cold take long turns, where the sun pours gold over one side, while the other side waits under a deep and restful chill, and where the boundary between day and night, the twilight edge, feels especially calm, especially lovely, especially suited for a traveler who wants only to hover and wonder. Mercury's surface is covered in craters because it has kept the memory of ancient impacts for billions of years. And instead of appearing wounded, it seems preserved, like an old manuscript whose marks have become part of its beauty. Some basins are enormous. Some ridges stretch for great distances where the planet slowly shrank as it cooled. And together, they make the world look gently folded, as though even rock can eventually relax. Beneath that quiet surface lies a remarkably large iron core, so large that it takes up most of the planet's interior. And this gives Mercury a surprising weight and seriousness, like a small bell made of dense metal, modest in appearance, but rich in hidden substance. As we glide above this little planet, we begin to understand why it belongs in a soothing science tale. Because Mercury is not loud in the imagination, not crowded with storms or bright rings or giant swirling clouds, but instead serene, spare, and elegant, teaching that stillness can also be extraordinary. So tonight we will move slowly, fact by fact, over bright scarps, across smooth volcanic plains, and along the quiet line where day loosens into night. And with each gentle detail, the mind may grow heavier in the nicest possible way. Thoughts dimming like distant lamps in a sleeping house. The body remembering how natural it is to rest, and the heart accepting that there is nowhere else to be, nothing else to solve, only this soft journey beside the smallest planet, this unhurried drift through scientific wonder, this calm companionship of stone, sunlight, and shadow, until the story itself becomes as light as breath and carries you the rest of the way towards sleep. Now, as our gentle bedtime story continues, let us drift a little lower over Mercury's quiet face, where the light of the sun moves not with haste, but with a kind of royal patience, spreading across the ancient plains in a golden sheet so slow and steady that it feels less like sunrise and more like a warm thought, gradually brightening the edge of a dream. And here in this relaxing story, with no noise but the hush of imagination, we can notice one of Mercury's loveliest truths, that although it is the closest planet to the sun, it does not rush through its days in the way we might expect, because Mercury spins very slowly, turning only 3 times for every 2 trips it makes around the sun, creating a graceful orbital rhythm so unusual that the pattern of daylight there feels almost musical, as though the planet were keeping time in a silent lullaby written in gravity and light. If you imagine yourself floating above a broad plain of dark, smooth rock, you may picture the surface below as softly bronzed and silvered, marked by old impacts, bright ejecta rays, and long wrinkles in the crust called scarps, where the planet contracted over immense spans of time as its interior cooled. And there is something deeply calming in that idea, that even a world made of stone can settle inward, can soften into a slightly smaller form, can fold itself carefully and without complaint, leaving behind long cliffs and curved ridges that trace the memory of change. Mercury is a planet of records kept in silence, a place where the absence of wind means the surface holds its ancient features for extraordinary lengths of time. And so, Every crater remains like a still bowl, every basin like a sleeping footprint, every rise and hollow like a note in a very old song that no storm has interrupted. And perhaps this is why Mercury feels so fitting for a nighttime story, because it reminds us that not all change must be loud, and not all history must be restless. Somewhere below us lies the Caloris Basin, one of the largest impact basins in the solar system, vast and circular, and ringed with the softened signatures of an event unimaginably old. And yet, even this grand scar appears peaceful now, as if time itself had placed a cool hand upon it and said, "Rest." And so it rests, surrounded by plains that later filled with volcanic material. For Mercury was once more geologically active than its quiet modern appearance suggests, with lavas spreading across parts of its surface and leaving smooth expanses that now reflect sunlight with a muted, sleepy glow. In this slow orbit, we may think of Mercury not as barren, but as elegantly minimal, a world that has kept only what it needs for beauty: stone, shadow, light, and a hidden magnetic whisper. Yes, Mercury has a magnetic field, faint compared with Earth's, but real, a subtle envelope shaped by the planet's large iron core. And there is something especially soothing about this invisible presence, a gentle reminder that even the smallest planet still carries an inner motion, an unseen dignity, as though deep inside its metallic heart there remains a quiet turning, a secret persistence. Above the surface, Mercury possesses not a thick atmosphere, but a very thin exosphere, made from atoms blasted loose by solar wind and micrometeorite impacts, with traces of sodium, potassium, oxygen, and other particles drifting so sparsely that the word atmosphere feels almost too heavy for them. And yet the idea is lovely in its own delicate way. A veil so light it is nearly a thought, a breath so faint it barely settles before it slips into space again. As we continue through this sleep story, letting each fact arrive softly and then settle, we come to the curious comfort of Mercury's temperatures. For the side facing the sun can become hotter than an oven, while the night side falls into deep and extraordinary cold, not because the planet is cruel, but because, without a thick atmosphere to hold and share heat, warmth cannot linger after the light is gone. And so Mercury teaches a peaceful lesson in contrast: brilliance and darkness, warmth and chill, day and night, each taking its turn without argument. Near the poles, hidden in craters that never receive direct sunlight, scientists have found evidence of water ice. And this may be one of the most tender facts about Mercury of all, that on a world so close to the sun, there are places of eternal shadow where ice can endure, tucked away like a secret kept in a cool drawer of the cosmos. And if that is not relaxing, then perhaps nothing is, because it tells us that even in the brightest neighborhoods of the solar system, there can still be pockets of preservation, quiet corners where something clear and still survives. So let your breathing remain unhurried now as we pass over crater rims and shadowed hollows, over smooth volcanic flats and old bright streaks left by impacts long ago. And let Mercury become not merely a planet in your mind, but a calm companion for the night, a small and sturdy world turning slowly through the dark, carrying its iron heart, its frozen polar secrets, its long sunrises and lingering nights, while you, safe and warm where you are, drift a little deeper into calm, a little farther from the day and a little closer to that pleasant edge where a gentle bedtime becomes deep sleep and thought dissolves into the quiet, spacious dark as our gentle bedtime story moves onward through the soft dark. Let us glide over a region where Mercury's surface seems almost to whisper its age in circles and ridges and smooth, dimly shining plains, and let this relaxing story become slower still, like a lantern being turned lower in a peaceful room, as we notice how the smallest planet carries itself with such quiet composure that even its oldest scars appear restful, settled into place by time so vast that the mind does not need to measure it, only feel its calm weight. And here above the cratered world, you may imagine the sunlight lying across the stone, not as a harsh blaze, but as a warm golden hush touching the rims of ancient basins and the long folds of land that mark where Mercury gradually contracted, cooled, and drew inward over ages beyond counting, as though the whole planet once gave a very slow exhale and simply never hurried to breathe in again. One of the loveliest things to remember as you drift here is that Mercury's gravity is much gentler than Earth's, only a little more than a third as strong, and in the imagination that makes this journey feel wonderfully weightless, as if your thoughts themselves had become lighter, less interested in carrying the day's concerns, more willing now to float beside crater walls and shadowed hollows with no need to land anywhere at all. And perhaps that is why Mercury is such a fitting companion for a sleep story, because it invites the mind to loosen its grip, to release its usual weight, to wander softly without destination. Below us, some craters have bright rays stretching away from them like pale brushstrokes on dark stone, reminders that impacts once stirred this quiet world. And yet nothing here feels violent now, because all has become still. All has been softened by deep time, and the planet wears its history, the way an old library wears dusk, gently, with dignity, with a calm that asks for silence rather than explanation. There are places on Mercury where the surface appears smoother, broad plains believed to have been shaped long ago by volcanic flows, and it is soothing to think that this now silent world once had a more active youth. That warmth rose from inside it, spread across the surface, then slowly faded, leaving behind wide regions of settled ground where the light now drifts unbroken for miles and miles, as though the planet had carefully made its own stone blankets and laid them down for a very long rest. Deep beneath all this quiet terrain rests Mercury's remarkable iron core, so large in proportion to the planet that it gives this little world a hidden seriousness, a kind of inward gravity of character. And while we float above the outer shell of ancient rock, it is pleasant to remember that beneath the stillness there remains a dense, metallic center, a patient heart that has shaped the planet's magnetic field and helped preserve its singular nature among the worlds nearest the sun. Even that magnetic field feels restful in this telling, not dramatic or stormy, but subtle and delicate, a quiet, invisible envelope that leans before the solar wind and endures, a reminder that small things are not weak, and that modest worlds may still hold profound inner structure, just as a hushed voice can carry meaning farther than a shout. As Mercury turns through its unusual rhythm, where 3 rotations pair with 2 orbits, the sun would seem to behave in strange ways for an observer on the ground, lingering, shifting, even seeming at times to pause in the sky. And there is something beautifully dreamlike in that image. The nearest world to the sun experiencing daylight, not as a quick march from east to west, but as a slow and curious performance, a celestial choreography so patient that it feels made for drowsy minds and heavy eyelids along the poles, in craters where sunlight never reaches. The shadows remain cold enough to preserve ice. And as we pass in imagination above those hidden sanctuaries, the idea itself becomes like a lullaby, a bright world with secret places of lasting coolness, a sunlit planet with chambers of shadow that cradle frozen water in silence, a reminder that the universe is often gentler and more layered than first impressions suggest. So continue now to rest your attention lightly on this small planet with its vast contrasts, its warm, bright daylands, its freezing dark, its cratered memory, its folded scarps, its delicate exosphere, its slow and graceful timing, and allow each fact to arrive not as information to hold onto, but as soft scenery passing beneath you, one peaceful detail after another, until knowledge itself becomes soothing, until Mercury becomes less a subject and more a quiet place in the mind, a serene orbit of silver rock and long sunlight and eternal shadow. And while we remain here together above this calm ancient world, the body may soften further into stillness, the breath may settle into an even gentler pattern, and the edges of thought may blur like distant horizons in the low golden glow, all of it carrying you farther into a gentle bedtime, farther into calming narration, farther into that lovely inner quiet where a nighttime story no longer feels like listening at all, but like floating, and floating no longer feels like motion, but like rest. Now, as this sleep story continues to drift with the patience of a quiet orbit, let us move above a region where Mercury's folded hills rise gently from the surface like soft creases in a sheet of dark silk, and let your attention rest there without effort, because this bedtime story is in no hurry at all, and neither are you, and neither, in its own strange way, is Mercury, even though it circles the sun more quickly than any other planet, because speed in one motion does not always mean haste in another. And this small world turns so slowly beneath the light that its mornings seem to last forever. Its shadows stretch with remarkable grace, and the sun itself would appear to hover, pause, and drift in ways that feel less like astronomy and more like a dream unfolding very, very slowly across a warm and ancient sky. Imagine then that you are floating just high enough to see the curvature of the planet ahead, while below you the land is patterned with old impact craters, quiet plains, and long scarps that bend across the terrain like relaxed seams, each one a sign that Mercury slowly shrank as its interior cooled over immense spans of time. And there is something wonderfully calming in that image, a whole planet gradually drawing inward, not out of fear or urgency, but out of nature, out of age, out of the same gentle law that tells leaves to curl, rivers to settle, and tired thoughts to soften at the end of a long day. Here on Mercury, there is almost no air to stir the dust, no rain to smooth the ridges, no weather to erase the old marks from the stone. And so the surface keeps its memories in stillness, preserving ancient details, the way a well-kept book preserves pressed flowers between its pages. And as we pass above these silent features, one by one, you may feel how restful it is to imagine a world where nothing interrupts the quiet, where nothing rushes to replace what has already been, where every crater rim and basin floor can remain exactly where it has rested for ages, beyond imagining. Some parts of Mercury glow a little brighter than others, where fresher material was flung outward long ago by impacts, and these pale streaks lie across the darker ground with a softness that, in the mind at night, can seem almost like moonlight on old stone, while elsewhere the plains broaden into smooth expanses formed by ancient volcanic activity, a reminder that this tranquil world once knew warmth from within, once allowed molten rock to spread and settle across its face, and then, over time, became quiet again, as though even a planet may spend its youth in motion and its later years in contemplation. Deep beneath the calm surface lies that great iron core, immense for such a small planet, giving Mercury a density that seems almost surprising, as if this little world had chosen to keep most of its weight close to the center. And perhaps that is another reason it feels so soothing tonight, because it embodies a kind of inwardness, a composed and centered quality, a silent strength that does not need to announce itself, only to remain. Even Mercury's magnetic field, modest though it is, suggests a hidden life within, a subtle and invisible boundary meeting the constant touch of the solar wind. And I like to think of it as a delicate cloak around the planet, thin but faithful, an unseen shimmer that accompanies Mercury on every swift circuit around the sun. If you were standing on the surface, which tonight we are content only to imagine from above, the sky would be black even in daytime, because there is no thick atmosphere to scatter sunlight into blue, and the stars would not twinkle in familiar comfort. Yet the scene would still possess a deep serenity, with sunlight lying sharply across the ground, shadows remaining dark and crisp, and the horizon curving quietly around you, as if the whole world were a polished stone set in velvet. Because Mercury rotates 3 times for every 2 orbits, the dance between day and year becomes beautifully peculiar. And on certain parts of the surface, the sun would seem to slow, stop, and briefly reverse before continuing on, a motion so unusual and so unhurried that it feels made for a nighttime story, a cosmic rhythm that does not jolt the mind awake, but instead lulls it into wonder, letting the listener feel that time itself can bend into softer shapes than the rigid schedules of ordinary life. Far away toward the poles, untouched by direct sunlight, some crater floors remain in permanent shadow, cold enough to preserve water ice, and that thought drifts through the mind like a cool breath, because even here, on the innermost planet, close to the sun's constant brilliance, there are protected pockets where frozen stillness can endure, secret reservoirs of calm, hidden in darkness, as if Mercury had tucked away little chambers of rest for those who know how to look gently enough. So we continue now in this relaxing story, not seeking anything, not solving anything, only gliding over folded ridges, old basins, smooth volcanic plains, and long unbroken shadows, while the planet beneath us turns in its patient way, and the light creeps over the land with ceremonial slowness. And perhaps your own thoughts can do the same, slowing, lengthening, becoming less definite, less eager to speak, until they are simply part of the hush, part of the orbit, part of this calm companionship between a resting listener and a small, remarkable planet. And as the chapter grows quieter, as the words soften and stretch like the horizon below, you may find yourself sinking a little further into gentle bedtime, into calming narration, into that pleasant, heavy stillness where the mind no longer tries to hold the story, but simply floats inside it, warm and safe, and increasingly ready to fall asleep. As this sleep story continues in its calm and steady orbit, let us drift now toward the high latitudes of Mercury, where the sunlight arrives at a gentler angle, and the landscape begins to feel even more hushed, even more protected, as though the small planet were lowering its voice for the sake of your rest. And in this bedtime story, where every fact is offered softly, and every image is meant to help you fall asleep, we come to one of Mercury's most peaceful wonders, the quiet polar regions, where certain craters are so deep and so carefully placed that the sun never reaches their floors, leaving them in permanent shadow, cool chambers preserved through immense stretches of time, like hidden rooms in an ancient stone house. Imagine yourself gliding above the rim of one of these craters now, not descending, not disturbing anything, only observing with the calm curiosity of a drowsy traveler, while behind you the higher ground catches a pale gold light, and ahead of you the hollow opens into stillness, a darkness not frightening but restful, the kind of darkness that belongs to closed curtains, quiet bedrooms, and distant libraries after midnight. And somewhere within those untouched, shaded places lies water ice, a lovely and almost secret fact for a planet so close to the sun, proof that even in a realm of brightness, there can be pockets of cool endurance, places where stillness gathers and remains. It is comforting to think that Mercury, so often described only in terms of heat, also holds these reservoirs of cold patience, because it reminds us that no world is only one thing, and no long day, however bright or busy, can prevent the eventual arrival of shade, quiet, and rest. Round the poles, the surface has a softened dignity in the imagination, crater walls curving like folded blankets, shadow lines resting motionless, and long stretches of ancient ground lying beneath the black sky, with no weather to trouble them, no wind to move even a grain of dust in any familiar earthly way, only the immense and nearly perfect silence of a small world keeping its own company. Here, in this relaxing story, Mercury becomes almost monastic, a planet of stone corridors and silent courtyards, where light and shadow sit side by side without conflict, and time does not hurry either one along. The sun, though close in the sky compared with other planets, cannot enter every place, and that simple limit feels strangely tender, as if the solar system itself understands that some corners are meant to remain cool and dim, protected for ages, holding their frozen treasures without needing attention. As we pass above one crater after another, let your breathing match the slow movement of our imagined orbit, long and easy, unforced and quiet, while your thoughts grow lighter, less detailed, less eager to follow every word. Because the purpose of this nighttime story is not to keep you alert, but to offer gentle company while wakefulness loosens its hold. Mercury's polar ice likely survives because these crater floors never receive direct sunlight. And though the surrounding planet may know severe heat elsewhere, these hidden hollows remain sheltered by geometry and stillness, by angle and shadow, by the simple peace of being left alone. And perhaps there's a lesson in that for the sleepy mind too. That rest often appears when we stop exposing every thought to harsh attention, and instead allow some inner room to grow quiet and dim. Beneath us, the crater rims curve with ancient precision, the stone old beyond ordinary imagination, and the contrast between illuminated peaks and dark interiors feels less like drama and more like balance, a soft arrangement of brightness and coolness that has endured through countless Mercurian sunrises. Even the thin exosphere of Mercury seems especially delicate here, more a trace than a covering, a faint collection of atoms moving so lightly that it scarcely counts as air at all. And because there is so little to blur the view, the shapes of the land remain beautifully clear, each edge composed, each shadow settled, each feature resting in the exact place where time has kept it. We continue onward without hurry, letting these calm facts about Mercury drift past like smooth stones in a quiet stream. The small planet with a great iron heart, the swift year and the slow day, the brilliant sun and the hidden ice, the ancient impacts and the preserved silence, all of it joining this gentle bedtime rhythm designed for deep sleep, all of it becoming less like information and more like atmosphere, more like a soft current carrying you along. And as our path arcs over the polar frontier and back toward the long, glowing boundary between light and dark, you may notice the story itself growing softer around the edges, its details widening into spaciousness, its science settling into serenity, until Mercury is no longer merely a subject above you, but a peaceful place within you. A small and quiet planet of craters, folded ridges, and cool shadow gardens, turning slowly in the black velvet near the sun, while you, safe and warm, drift farther into calm, farther into stillness, and perhaps already nearer to sleep than you realize. As our gentle sleep story continues, let us now follow the long and peaceful curve where Mercury's daylight leans at last toward evening, that soft borderland where brightness loosens its hold and shadow rises, not suddenly, but with exquisite patience. And in this bedtime story, meant to help you fall asleep through calming narration and slow scientific wonder, the little planet seems to become even more serene, as if all its ancient stone were preparing for rest in the same unhurried way you are now, with with no need to hurry, no need to think too sharply, only to drift and notice the way the low sunlight spreads across crater rims, catches on old escarpments, and turns the landscape into a quiet arrangement of silver, bronze, and gentle charcoal. Below us, the ground appears both delicate and enduring, a world shaped long ago, and then left in remarkable stillness, with broad plains flowing outward between craters like cooled and polished satin, and with ridges crossing the surface in long, soft arcs, reminders that Mercury slowly contracted as it aged, folding inward with a patience that feels almost comforting. Because this is a planet that does not resist time, does not struggle against change, but carries its history openly and calmly, as though every wrinkle in its crust were simply another sign of having settled more deeply into itself. In this relaxing story, the smallest planet becomes a kind of lesson in quiet balance. For Mercury is a world of opposites held gently together. The hottest days beside the coldest nights, the blazing nearness of the sun beside the hidden preservation of polar ice, the swift race of the year beside the lingering stretch of the day. And none of these contrasts feel harsh from here, because distance and softness have transformed them into rhythm, into pattern, into a slow celestial breathing that makes the mind feel less crowded and the body feel heavier in the nicest possible way. Imagine that our orbit has become so smooth now that it is hardly motion at all, only a continuous and silky glide above the evening line. And as we travel there, you may picture the sun low and grand beyond the horizon, larger than it would ever seem from Earth, yet no longer intense in this telling, only warm and ceremonial, like a lamp being dimmed in a great quiet hall. The shadows beneath us lengthen across old impact basins and smooth volcanic plains, filling the lower ground with velvety darkness, while the highest edges remain lit for a little while longer. And this gradual surrender of the landscape to night feels especially soothing on Mercury, because the planet has so little atmosphere that the transition is not softened by weather or cloud, but by geometry alone, by angle and stillness, by the simple turning of a small dents whirled through black space. Somewhere beneath us, ancient craters hold their silence exactly as they have for ages, untouched by wind, unblurred by rain, each rim and wall preserved with extraordinary clarity. And there is something deeply restful in that permanence, in the knowledge that a place can remain so quiet for so long that even its oldest marks become part of a tranquil design rather than a disturbance. Mercury's large iron core, hidden far below these cooling rocks, lends the planet its unusual density and its faint magnetic field. And I like to imagine that hidden center now as a patient ember inside a darkened bell, not blazing, not calling attention to itself, but simply existing with calm purpose, while the surface above lies in dignified hush. Even the exosphere, that nearly their veil of scattered atoms, feels tonight less like a scientific detail and more like a whisper around the planet, too thin to stir, too delicate to veil the stars, only a faint suggestion that Mercury is never entirely separate from the wider currents of the solar system. As the story grows sleepier, you may notice that facts no longer arrive as pieces to remember, but as soft little lanterns passing one by one through the mind. Mercury, the smallest planet. Mercury, the fast traveler around the sun. Mercury, the world with the slow and curious day. Mercury, the keeper of shadowed ice. Mercury, the ancient sphere of folds, plains, bright rays, and quiet basins. Mercury, so near the center of the solar family, and yet so wonderfully still in imagination. Let those lanterns drift now without needing to hold any of them. Let them pass slowly across the dark like boats on a midnight river, while your breathing settles more deeply and your thoughts become softer at the edges, less interested in words, more willing to rest in tone and image and hush. We continue along the evening boundary, where the sunlit stone dims inch by inch, where old ridges become silhouettes, where basin floors cool beneath the black sky, and where all the patient features of Mercury seem to draw together into one great feeling of stillness. A stillness that does not empty the world, but fills it with peace. And perhaps that is the most relaxing truth of all tonight, that this small planet, for all its extremes and strangeness, offers the sleepy mind not excitement, but calm, not urgency, but rhythm, not noise, but quiet majesty. And so, as our gentle bedtime journey carries us onward over the silver rim of evening, you may allow yourself to drift further from the day you have lived, further from its lists and voices and bright little worries, and closer to that serene inner darkness where the story becomes indistinct, where Mercury becomes a soft shape turning slowly near the sun, and where you, wrapped in this nighttime story, can simply keep floating toward deep sleep. Now, as this sleep story glides onward into Mercury's long and peaceful night, let us settle into an even softer rhythm, one quiet enough to feel like a lullaby made of distance, silence, and starlight, because this bedtime story is not here to lead you anywhere quickly, but only to accompany you gently as the smallest planet turns beneath us, and the warm gleam of its day gives way to a vast, velvety darkness so deep and calm that even thought itself may begin to loosen and drift. And here, above the resting stone of Mercury, with no clouds to gather, no winds to wander, and no sound at all in the imagination, except the hush of your own breathing, the whole world seems to exhale. Below us, the craters that once shone at the edge of evening have now become quiet bowls of shadow, and the smooth plains between them look like darkened silk stretched wide beneath a black sky where the stars do not flicker but remain steady and distant. And there is something wonderfully comforting in such steadiness, because Mercury at night feels like a place where nothing is expected, nothing is demanded, and nothing hurries the hours along. The sun, though still close by in the architecture of the solar system, has slipped from this side of the planet for now, and without a thick atmosphere to keep the warmth near the ground, the temperature falls into extraordinary cold, not as a threat in our relaxing story, but as a deep cosmic stillness, a perfect hush of stone surrendering its heat to space, a patient cooling that takes place over the long Mercurian night, like a room slowly dimming after a lamp has been switched off. It is soothing to remember that Mercury is a planet of extremes held in elegant balance, a world where brilliant heat and profound cold take turns with immense courtesy, each one waiting for its moment, each one receding in its time. And from our gentle orbit, this exchange feels less like contrast and more like breathing. The world warming, the world cooling, the world turning slowly through a rhythm older than memory. Beneath the dark surface lies that great iron core, hidden and dense and silent. And I like to imagine it now as a calm and ancient center of gravity, not restless, not dramatic, but steady, as though Mercury carries within itself a quiet anchor while the outer crust rests under the night. Across the land, bright rays from younger craters have faded into subtler tones, but their shapes still linger in the darkness, like pale threads woven into old fabric. And the long scarps where the planet once shrank inward remain stretched across the terrain like soft folds in a blanket, signs that even rock, over enough time, may draw itself inward and become more compact, more settled, more at peace. There is a lovely drowsiness in the idea that Mercury has spent billions of years preserving these features simply because there is almost no weather to erase them, no rain to wear them down, no wind to smooth them over, only stillness keeping stillness company. And perhaps that is why this nighttime story can feel so calming, because Mercury offers a vision of quiet that is complete, uninterrupted, and lasting. Far toward the poles, the permanently shadowed craters continue to cradle their hidden ice. And in the mind, those places seem cooler and quieter than ever now, little chambers of eternal dimness held within a world already wrapped in night. And their presence adds another layer of softness to our journey, a reminder that rest may exist even inside rest, and that the universe, for all its size, sometimes keeps its gentlest treasures in the darkest and most protected corners. As we continue floating, the facts themselves begin to soften around the edges, becoming less like information and more like a calming narration carried on a slow current. Mercury, small and dense; Mercury, swift in year and slow in day; Mercury, cratered and folded; Mercury, bright by sunlight and freezing by night; Mercury, keeper of a faint magnetic field and a nearly invisible exosphere; Mercury, close to the sun and yet full of hidden cold. Let these truths drift by without needing to hold them too tightly. Let them become part of the atmosphere of this gentle bedtime, part of the quiet arrangement of phrases that asks nothing more from you now than to listen loosely, to breathe slowly, and to let your body feel heavier where it rests. Above the horizon, the stars seem endless, and below, the planet turns with such calm patience that time itself appears to loosen, as if the night on Mercury were broad enough to hold every unfinished thought until morning without effort. So we remain here a little longer, suspended above the sleeping stone, watching the shadows deepen in crater floors, watching the ridges dissolve into softness, watching the little planet become simpler and quieter as darkness gathers across it. And in this relaxing story, there is no need for anything to happen next in a hurry, because this is the part of the journey where stillness becomes the event, where silence becomes the scenery, and where the mind, no longer interested in following every word, may simply drift inside the gentle image of Mercury at rest. a small and ancient world turning through the black velvet near the sun, while you, safe and warm and steadily growing sleepier, float with it toward deep sleep as this gentle sleep story continues through the hush of Mercury's long night. Let us remain in our quiet orbit and listen, not with the ears, but with the imagination, for the hidden music of this small and ancient planet, because every world has its own rhythm, and Mercury's rhythm is among the slowest and most curious of all. A rhythm made not of sound, but of turning and circling, of day that lingers and year that slips by, of sunlight that takes its time and darkness that settles deeply. And in this bedtime story, where every fact is meant to soften the mind rather than sharpen it, that rhythm becomes something like a lullaby, a patient celestial pattern, rocking you gently farther from the day and nearer to deep sleep. Below us, the dark surface drifts by with almost ceremonial calm, crater after crater passing beneath our path like old bowls carved into sleeping stone, their rims softened by distance, their floors filled with velvet shadow, and between them, the smoother plains stretch out in broad, quiet sheets, reminders that Mercury, though now so still, once knew ancient volcanic flows that spread across its face and then cooled into lasting calm, leaving behind great settled regions that seem tonight like resting places for light itself. There is no weather here to interrupt the stillness, no cloud to gather, no rain to fall, no breeze to lift even a grain of dust in any familiar earthly way. And because of that, the planet keeps its old features with extraordinary fidelity, preserving basins, ridges, scarps, and bright rays across spans of time, so immense that the ordinary mind need not count them at all, only accept their patient presence as part of the serene design. Mercury's strange partnership between rotation and orbit continues even now beneath us. 3 spins for every 2 journeys around the sun, a graceful relationship that would make the sky behave in unusual ways for any silent observer standing on the ground. And there is something deeply relaxing in that idea, that on this little world, the sun would not always stride steadily overhead, but might seem to hesitate, to linger, even to reverse for a while, as if time itself had become drowsy and decided to move with more softness than usual. In our nighttime story, that unusual motion feels less like complexity and more like mercy, a reminder that the universe is not made only of strict lines and quick clocks, but also of slower patterns, stranger beauties, and rhythms that invite the mind to stop pressing forward and simply float. Deep inside Mercury rests its immense iron core, surprisingly large for such a small world. And tonight, it seems easy to imagine that hidden center as the planet's quiet bell of gravity, dense and composed, giving Mercury its weight, its faint magnetic field, and its inward sense of stability, as if the smallest planet had gathered most of its being close to the center and learned there the art of silent strength. Even the magnetic field, delicate beside Earth's, adds to the sense that Mercury is not empty or barren, but subtly alive with structure, carrying around itself a gentle, invisible influence while the solar wind passes by. And somehow that feels comforting too, because even a quiet world can have an unseen presence, just as even a quiet person may carry a deep and steady warmth within. Far away in the permanently shadowed craters near the poles, ice continues to rest in darkness, hidden from direct sunlight. And this remains one of the loveliest thoughts in our relaxing story, that a planet known for fierce sunlight also protects cold and stillness in secret pockets, preserving frozen water like a whispered promise that rest can exist anywhere, even near brightness, even near pressure, even in places the waking mind might first mistake for too intense. As we pass onward over the sleeping terrain, the long scarps where Mercury, contracted with age, seem like folds in a blanket drawn carefully across the surface, and the impact basins appear less like marks of collision and more like ancient quiet courtyards, old enough now to have become peaceful, softened by perspective, made calm by surviving. And perhaps that is one reason Mercury belongs so naturally in a sleep story, because it teaches that old things can still be gentle, that extremes can still be balanced, that silence can be full rather than empty, and that even a world nearest the sun can spend most of its time in a kind of dignified hush. So let the facts continue to drift by like dim lanterns on dark water. Mercury, smallest of the planets, Mercury, dense with iron, Mercury, swift in its year and slow in its sunrise, Mercury, cratered, folded, magnetic, ancient Mercury, with hidden ice, black skies, and plains that remember long-cooled fire. You do not need to gather these facts or organize them, or keep them awake inside your thoughts. Let them pass softly, each one appearing for a moment, and then dissolving into the larger calm, while your breathing finds its own easy cadence, and your body settles more completely into stillness. We remain in orbit above this quiet world, watching the stars hold steady over a horizon of sleeping stone, watching darkness rest in every basin and along every ridge, watching the smallest planet turn through its curious and patient rhythm. And as it turns, perhaps your own thoughts may turn more slowly too, and then slower still, until they scarcely feel like thoughts at all, only soft impressions, shadows of words, gentle movements in a calm interior space. And there, in that drifting place, where story becomes atmosphere and atmosphere becomes rest, Mercury continues its hidden music, and you continue to float with it, safe and warm, steadily carried toward sleep, as this sleep story continues through the deep and velvety middle of Mercury's night. Let us drift a little closer in imagination to the quiet mystery hidden beneath the planet's ancient crust, to that great iron heart resting inside the smallest planet. Because in this bedtime story, where science arrives like a soft lantern in the dark, Mercury is never only stone and shadow, never only craters and silence, but also a world with an inward character, a calm and private structure that quietly shapes everything above it. And as we float over the sleeping terrain, with the black sky spread wide and still around us, it is soothing to remember that this small planet is unusually dense, packed with metal in a way that makes it feel almost like a polished weight in the palm of the solar system, modest in size, yet rich in substance, as though Mercury had chosen long ago to keep most of its strength close to the center, Beneath us, crater rims pass slowly in the dark, like the edges of old bowls carved into silver-black stone, while long scarps stretch across the land in broad, graceful arcs, folds left behind as the planet cooled and contracted over immense ages. And each one seems tonight less like a mark of geological change and more like the crease in a well-loved blanket. Something settled, something softened by time, something that belongs exactly where it is. This relaxing story asks nothing from you now, except that you continue to float, continue to breathe slowly, continue to let the words move around you without needing to hold each one, because Mercury itself is teaching us how quiet persistence works, how a world can circle the sun quickly and still feel serene, how a day can stretch longer than a year and still unfold with elegance, how extremes can coexist without noise. Somewhere far below the old crust, that oversized iron core helps sustain Mercury's magnetic field, a faint one compared with Earth's, but real and gentle all the same. And there is something deeply calming in that fact, because it means that even here, on a planet so small and so ancient, there remains a subtle, invisible compass, a delicate field leaning into the solar wind and quietly holding its shape, like a candle flame that never strains, only glows. The surface above this hidden interior has its own quiet curiosities too, including bright, shallow depressions called hollows, little luminous features that appear younger than much of the surrounding land, as though some parts of Mercury still remember how to change in whispers rather than in thunder. And I like to think of those hollows as the planet's soft sighs, places where material slowly left the surface and brightness remained, pale and fresh against darker ground. Tiny reminders that even a very old world can still carry hints of delicacy. In this nighttime story, such details do not arrive as sharp facts to be studied, but as smooth stones set gently into the path of your imagination. Mercury with its great metallic center, Mercury with its preserved craters, Mercury with its silent plains of ancient lava, Mercury with its bright hollows and hidden ice, Mercury with a magnetic murmur so subtle it feels almost like a secret. And perhaps secrets are especially welcome in a gentle bedtime, because they slow the mind in a pleasant way, inviting wonder without urgency, curiosity without effort. Above the horizon, the stars remain clear and unwavering, because there's almost no atmosphere here to blur them. And that too has a sleepy beauty, a sense of uncluttered space, of quiet distances untouched by weather or haze, while below us the land continues in patterns of basin, ridge, and shadow, so ancient and so still that it feels less like a landscape and more like a memory held carefully by the solar system. Mercury's year, so short by Earth's measure, and its sunrise, so slow by any measure, continue their strange and elegant relationship even while this side of the planet sleeps. And if time on Earth often feels fast and crowded, Mercury offers another image entirely, one in which motion and stillness can exist together, one in which a world races around the sun, yet allows light and darkness to linger, one in which nothing about the sky seems in a hurry to become something else. As we pass over a darker basin now, imagine its floor resting in complete silence, its edges barely silvered by the faintest reflected glow. And let that image help your thoughts become gentler, less defined, more willing to settle. There is no need to remember every fact in this calming narration, only to feel the softness of them. The way knowledge here becomes atmosphere, becomes comfort, becomes part of the warm and quiet current carrying you toward deep sleep. So we continue above Mercury's resting surface, over old impact plains and delicate hollows, over folded ridges and dark crater floors, while the invisible influence of its iron heart extends outward in faint and patient lines. And the whole little planet seems to turn in sleep, not inert but peaceful, not empty but inward, a small world with a hidden compass and a remarkable dignity. And as our orbit remains smooth and unbroken through the long Mercurian night, you may let your own mind become smooth and unbroken too. No sharp edges, no urgent corners, only slow drifting, only a gentle bedtime, only this serene companion of stone and metal and shadow beside the sun, carrying you farther from waking and nearer to rest. As this sleep story continues through the calm and spacious dark, let us remain for a little while longer above Mercury's resting surface, where night still holds the land in its cool and patient embrace, and where the smallest planet seems to turn so quietly that it almost feels less like motion and more like a long, thoughtful pause. The kind of pause that comes just before morning, just before the first hint of brightness returns to the edge of the world. And in this bedtime story, meant to guide you gently toward deep sleep, that coming dawn does not arrive with urgency or brilliance, but with softness, with patience, with the same serene rhythm that has carried us all this way through craters, plains, ridges, shadowed hollows, and the hidden calm of Mercury's iron heart. Beneath us, the land is still mostly dark, a landscape of ancient bowls and folded stone, of quiet basins and broad volcanic flats. And because there is almost no atmosphere to blur or soften the view, every shape remains beautifully clear in the imagination, each crater rim delicately outlined against the darkness, each scarp stretching across the ground like the seam of a blanket carefully laid over a sleeping form. Mercury is such a small planet, and yet it holds so much stillness that its size begins to feel beside the point. Because what matters here in this relaxing story is not how large the world is, but how peacefully it carries its contrasts, how elegantly it keeps company with both heat and cold, day and night, brightness and shadow, and how gently those opposites seem to take turns. Somewhere far beyond the horizon ahead, the sun is waiting, not yet visible from where we drift, but already preparing the next long day. And there is a wonderful drowsiness in that thought, that even on a planet closest to the sun, dawn can take its time, can linger below the edge of the world like a lamp behind a curtain, slowly brightening the fabric before it shines through. As we travel onward, the night side of Mercury continues to release its stored warmth into space, becoming colder and quieter. And in this calm telling that cooling feels soothing rather than severe, like the pleasant drop in temperature when a room is finally ready for sleep, when the blankets feel just right, when the body no longer wants anything except to be still. The stars above remain sharp and steady in the black sky, not twinkling through thick air as they do from Earth, but resting in place with a kind of serene certainty. And below them, the little planet turns with slow devotion, holding its old impact scars and smooth lava plains exactly where time has left them, preserving billions of years in silence. It is lovely to think that Mercury has no weather to interrupt its memories, no wind to erase the edges of a crater, no rain to wash the dust into new patterns, only the occasional touch of sunlight, the occasional passing particle, and the endless patient sequence of long day and long night. Perhaps that is why Mercury feels so well suited to a nighttime story, because it offers a kind of peace that is structural, a peace built into the very way it exists, into its measured turning, its preserved terrain, its thin exosphere, its faint magnetic field, and the secret ice hidden in permanent polar shadow. Even now, while this side of the planet sleeps, those shadowed polar craters remain cool and still, keeping their quiet stores of frozen water far from direct sunlight. And that image moves through the mind like a lullaby, soft and unlikely, and comforting all at once. A reminder that even near brilliance, there may be places untouched by glare, places where calm endures for ages. As our orbit carries us gradually toward the unseen line of morning, the shapes below begin to feel gentler, less like geology and more like texture, less like features to be named, and more like the slow fabric of a peaceful world. And perhaps your own thoughts may begin to do the same, losing their sharp labels, their edges, their lists, and becoming instead a softer field of impressions, dim and easy and untroubled. This is the gift of a gentle bedtime, of calming narration, of a sleep story that does not push forward too quickly, but allows the mind to loosen naturally, to stop arranging and evaluating, to simply float. Mercury, with its swift little year and lingering day, with its dense metallic center and its old quiet scars, with its bright sunlit future just beyond the horizon and its cool darkness still wrapped around the land beneath us, continues to turn as if it has all the time in the universe. And in a way it does. So let us drift with it now, in this final stretch of night before dawn, above crater floors deep in shadow, above ridges shaped by contraction, above plains once warmed by ancient lava and now resting under the black sky. And let the coming light remain far enough away that it feels only like a promise, not an arrival, only like a pale thought at the margin of sleep. There is no need to follow every sentence anymore, no need to gather every fact about Mercury and keep it awake in your mind. Let the facts become distant lanterns now, dim and lovely, while the story itself grows softer and softer around you, until this small planet is no longer merely something you are hearing about, but something you are drifting beside, quietly, peacefully, as if you too were suspended above a silent horizon, waiting with no effort at all for the gentlest possible dawn. And perhaps, before it ever comes, you will already have floated far enough into rest to fall asleep. And now, as this sleep story drifts onward through the hush before morning, let us remain above Mercury just a little longer, in that tender interval when the horizon has not yet fully brightened the darkness no longer feels complete, because somewhere ahead, beyond the quiet curve of the planet, the sun is preparing to return. And in this bedtime story, meant to help you fall asleep with calm and ease, even sunrise on Mercury does not feel sudden, but slow and ceremonial, as though the smallest planet were lifting a silver curtain by the gentlest possible degree, allowing the faintest thread of light to touch the rims of old craters, the edges of smooth plains, and the long folded scarps that have rested here in silence for ages beyond counting. Below us, the land is still mostly dark, but not with the same deep velvet of midnight. Now, there is the slightest distinction between shadow and form, the quiet suggestion of basins broadening into view, of ancient volcanic flats waiting patiently beneath the cool black sky, of ridge lines emerging one by one like thoughts that do not need to become fully clear before they dissolve again into softness. Mercury, with its strange and graceful rhythm, where the year races by more quickly than the day, seems almost made for this kind of moment, a world that understands lingering, a world where light does not simply arrive and depart, but stretches itself across time with unusual patience, letting dawn become an extended whisper rather than an announcement. It is pleasant to imagine the sunlight approaching now, not fierce, not overwhelming, but warm in principle and distant in feeling, as if the very idea of morning were taking a long, quiet breath before entering the room. In this relaxing story, Mercury's famous contrasts become especially gentle here, because the cold of night is still settled in the stone, while the promise of day waits just beyond the horizon. And between those two conditions, there exists a calm threshold, neither fully one nor fully the other, a delicate balance that feels wonderfully suited to the drowsy mind, which also hovers between states, not quite wakeful anymore, not quite asleep, but floating softly in between. Beneath the surface, that great iron core remains hidden and steady, giving Mercury its unusual density and faint magnetic presence. And tonight, or perhaps now this early morning, it seems less like a scientific detail than like a quiet center of gravity for the story itself, a reminder that beneath every tranquil surface, there may be something firm and enduring, some inward steadiness holding everything gently together. Across the plains, ancient impact craters continue to keep their shape, because there is almost no weather here to blur them, no wind to shift their dust into new patterns, no rain to round their rims, only long sequences of light and shadow, heating and cooling, preserving the landscape in a kind of solemn stillness. And there is something deeply comforting in such preservation, in the idea that some places in the universe can simply remain. Even Mercury's thin exosphere, so faint it is nearly only a trace, adds to the delicacy of this hour, because nothing much stands between the stone and space, between the horizon and the stars, between the coming day and the night that still lingers in the hollows. Far toward the poles, the permanently shadowed craters continue to shelter their quiet stores of ice, untouched by this approaching dawn, protected in darkness as they have been for ages. And that image too feels restful, because it suggests that even when light returns, Not all coolness must disappear. Not all stillness must be disturbed. Some calm things endure. Some shaded rooms of the universe stay softly dim as we continue our gentle orbit. The first narrow line of sunlight finally begins to gather along the horizon, touching the highest edges first, turning them pale gold, while the lower ground remains blue-black and silver-gray. And this gradual awakening of the land feels less like the start of a day, and more like the turning of a page, so slowly that one can barely tell when the old page ends and the new begins. Let your thoughts follow that page if they wish, or let them drift away from it entirely. There is no need now to keep close track of every crater, every ridge, every fact about Mercury's swift year, or slow rotation, or hidden ice, or metallic heart. Those facts have done their work already. They have carried us here through the long, quiet night, and into this first tender approach of dawn. And now they may soften into atmosphere, into tone, into a gentle bedtime feeling that asks almost nothing from the mind except surrender. The little planet beneath us continues to turn, untroubled and ancient, letting light return in its own strange time, while you remain safe and warm, floating above resting stone and long, cool shadows, listening as the narration grows softer, as the words stretch farther apart inside your thoughts, as the story itself becomes less distinct and more like a low, peaceful current. And perhaps this is the loveliest part of all, the moment when Mercury does not need to be understood anymore, only felt as a quiet presence near the sun, a small world of silver dawn, dark basins, folded hills, hidden ice, and immense patience, accompanying you so gently that before the morning fully arrives, you may already have slipped into deep sleep. As this gentle sleep story continues, let us drift with unhurried grace into Mercury's long, patient morning, where the first light has now begun to spill more generously across the ancient surface, touching crater rims, softening the darkness inside old basins, and stretching pale gold across the quiet plains, as if the smallest planet were being wrapped, very slowly, in a shawl of sunlight. And in this bedtime story, where every image is meant to ease you toward rest, morning does not awaken the world with noise or urgency, but with the calm dignity of something that has all the time it could ever need. And perhaps that is why Mercury remains such a soothing companion in this relaxing story, because even its sunrise feels meditative, a slow unveiling across a landscape that has waited billions of years without complaint. Below us, the ridges formed when the planet gradually contracted are beginning to glow along their upper edges, while their lower slopes still rest in cool blue-gray shadow. And that simple contrast of light and dimness feels like a perfect picture for the drowsy mind, which never moves from wakefulness to sleep all at once, but drifts through soft boundaries and quiet transitions, just as Mercury moves through its own long and graceful cycle of day and night. The broad plains, once shaped by ancient lava flows, now appear smooth and settled beneath the returning sun. And there is something deeply comforting in the thought that this small world, once warmer and more geologically active, has spent so much of its long life becoming quieter, calmer, more composed, as though it had gradually learned the art of stillness, and now offers that lesson back to us through calming narration, gentle bedtime imagery, and one peaceful scientific fact after another. Mercury's nearness to the sun may sound intense when spoken quickly, but here, in the soft hush of this nighttime story, it becomes something else entirely. A kind of closeness without commotion, a warm center nearby, and a quiet little planet moving faithfully around it, carrying its great iron heart, its faint magnetic field, and its nearly invisible exosphere with modest steadiness, never asking for attention, only turning through space with quiet purpose as more light reaches the surface. Some of the younger craters show their pale rays more clearly, fine bright markings stretching over darker terrain like chalk, gently brushed across old stone. And even these traces of ancient impacts feel restful now, because time has softened their drama into pattern, into texture, into part of the planet's enduring face. It is lovely to imagine that if you could stand there, in that black sky and sharp sunlight, the horizon would feel close and curved and intimate, the land stretching not into chaos, but into serene simplicity, with no wind to interrupt the silence, and no weather to disturb the old arrangements of dust and rock. Only the immense quiet that Mercury keeps so faithfully far away toward the poles, hidden within craters that the sun still cannot touch. The preserved ice remains in shadow, and that idea continues to move through the story like a cool silver thread, because it reminds us that even while morning unfolds, not every corner must brighten, not every place must surrender its stillness, and there is comfort in that, especially for a sleepy mind that needs dim corners, soft edges, and room to rest without being fully called into the light. As our orbit continues, smooth as breath, the sun climbs a little more, though on Mercury, even that climbing feels almost dreamlike in its slowness, and the land beneath us becomes an elegant mosaic of illuminated rims, fading shadows, folded scarps, and quiet flats, all of it so old, so preserved, and so beautifully unhurried that the facts themselves begin to dissolve into atmosphere again. Mercury, the smallest planet. Mercury, the fast traveler with the slow sunrise. Mercury, the dense little world with a giant iron core. Mercury, the keeper of old craters, hidden ice, and majestic temperature swings. Mercury, the planet of long silence and patient light. You do not need to remember these things now in any careful way. You only need to let them pass gently through the mind, like smooth pebbles dropped one by one into calm water, sending out wider and softer rings until even the rings disappear. The body knows what to do from here. The breath knows how to settle. The thoughts know how to grow less detailed, less insistent, less interested in holding shape. And so this sleep story continues not by pushing forward, but by becoming softer, by allowing Mercury's morning to spread at its own tender pace across the imagination, while you remain safe and warm where you are, listening without effort as the little planet glows more fully beneath us, its ancient stone receiving the day in silence, its shadows retreating with elegance, its ridges and plains and basins resting exactly where they have rested for ages, beyond measure. In that calm, the very idea of time seems to loosen again, as it so often does here beside Mercury, where the year is brief, the day is long, and the motion of light feels more like a slow chant than a schedule, more like a cradle song than a clock. And perhaps that is why this gentle bedtime journey can carry you so easily now, because Mercury asks nothing quick of the mind, offers nothing loud, and keeps turning with such modest and ancient grace that you may simply drift with it, farther from the day behind you, farther into the hush ahead, until the warm edge of morning becomes only a pale softness at the margin of awareness, and the story itself becomes light enough to fade into sleep. As this gentle sleep story continues, let us remain in our calm orbit above Mercury a little longer, because morning here is in no hurry to become fully bright, and that lingering slowness is part of what makes this bedtime story feel so peaceful, so suitable for a relaxing story meant to help you fall asleep, even as the light grows stronger, because on Mercury, even the arrival of day seems to happen with a kind of deep patience, as though the planet were not waking abruptly at all, but simply opening one quiet eye toward the sun, and then resting there in silence. Below us, the ancient surface is now touched more broadly by light, and the crater rims that once appeared as faint outlines in the dark have become pale arcs of gold and silver, while the wide plains between them remain soft and subdued, holding just enough shadow to keep the landscape restful, just enough dimness to preserve the hush that has carried us through the night. The beauty of Mercury is that it never needs clouds, oceans, forests, or storms to feel complete in a sleep story like this one, because its stillness is its own kind of richness, and its cratered face, its folded ridges, and its slow turning through space offer a serenity all their own, a serenity made not of movement and drama, but of endurance, balance, and quiet light. Imagine the ground beneath us now as a vast and ancient tapestry of stone, woven from impact basins, smooth volcanic plains, pale streaks, and gentle scarps that curve across the land where the planet slowly shrank over unimaginable time. And think how soothing it is that even a whole world can grow calmer as it grows older, can settle inward instead of expanding outward, can become more composed with age, more softly folded, more inwardly still. In this relaxing story, Mercury feels almost like a small monastery of rock circling close to the sun, a place where silence has been preserved for billions of years, where the black sky never fills with weather, where the horizon stays clean and curved and near, and where the sun, though powerful, seems less like a ruler and more like a warm presence at the edge of a quiet room. As the light spreads, some younger craters reveal faint, bright rays brushed over the darker surface, delicate markings that look less like evidence of violent history and more like chalk, gently drawn across old slate, because time has softened every sharpness into pattern, into memory, into calm design. It is easy here to let facts become feelings, to let knowledge itself grow drowsy. And so Mercury's truths pass by as softly as breath. A tiny planet with a great iron center, a quick year and a slow day, a world of extreme temperature changes, and yet extraordinary calm, a place where permanent shadow guards ice, while bright sunlight warms the open plains. None of these things need to stay sharply outlined in your mind now. They can blur in the nicest possible way, the way distant hills blur in morning haze, the way a remembered lullaby softens as sleep approaches. Beneath us, the long scarps rise and fall like gentle seams in a blanket laid over the land, and the low sun catches their edges while leaving their deeper sides cool and dim. And this contrast, repeated again and again across the landscape, gives Mercury a quiet rhythm of light and shade, warm and cool, seen and hidden, as if the whole planet were breathing in a measured, peaceful way. Far toward the poles, the secret craters that never receive direct sunlight continue to shelter their frozen stillness, untouched by the wider brightness of morning. And there is something deeply comforting in knowing that even as day returns, some corners remain shaded and cool. Some places are allowed to stay hushed. Some chambers of rest are never forced open. Perhaps that is why this nighttime story continues to feel so gentle even in daylight. Because Mercury is not a world that abandons calm when the sun rises. It simply changes the tone of the calm, turning darkness into glow, shadow into contrast, silence into a quieter kind of shining. And as our orbit carries us forward, smooth and nearly effortless, you may feel your own thoughts becoming similarly smooth, no longer separate and busy, no longer sharp enough to demand attention, but floating together in one soft field of awareness, as though the mind had become another quiet plane on Mercury, lit slowly from one side while the other side still rests. The body grows heavier, but in a pleasant way, in the way blankets grow heavier when they feel exactly right. And the story itself becomes less a sequence of words and more a soft atmosphere surrounding you, a gentle bedtime current carrying you onward without effort. Mercury continues below, small and ancient and dignified, its stone face glowing under the lengthening morning, its hidden iron heart steady at the center, its preserved craters and plains holding the memory of deep time in perfect silence. And there is no need to reach the end of any thought now, no need to hold onto any image for long, because this sleep story is content to drift, content to repeat its soft wonder, content to let the smallest planet in the solar system become a cradle of calm in the imagination, until even the golden stillness of its slowly waking day grows distant, diffuse, and dreamlike, and you, following it gently, are carried farther into deep sleep as this gentle sleep story continues. Let us remain beside Mercury as its long morning drifts gradually toward the calm brightness of noon. Because even here, on the smallest planet, where the sun hangs nearer than it does for any other world in our familiar planetary family, the movement of light still feels unhurried in our bedtime story, still slow enough to soothe the mind rather than stir it. And so we float on above the ancient surface, while the low golden tones of morning soften into a steadier glow, spreading across crater rims, volcanic plains, and folded scarps with the same patient grace that has carried us through the quiet night and into this next peaceful phase of the journey. Below us, Mercury seems almost entirely awake now, though awake is perhaps too lively a word for a world so serene, because nothing on its surface rushes or rustles or calls out. And even in fuller light, the planet remains composed, a place of preserved silence, where every feature appears settled into its role with immense dignity, each basin holding its shape, each ridge extending in long curved lines, each old crater resting like a shallow bowl in a vast stone garden. There's something deeply comforting in that kind of stillness, in the thought that a whole world may be fully illuminated and yet remain quiet, fully revealed and yet never loud. And perhaps that is why Mercury continues to feel so suitable for a relaxing story, because it reminds us that brightness does not always mean commotion, and that closeness to the sun does not prevent a world from carrying itself with calm restraint. Imagine the land beneath us now as a broad, luminous mosaic, where smooth plains formed by ancient lava lie between older, cratered regions, and where the planet's long, wrinkle-like scarps cast only modest shadows now, their dark edges shrinking as the sun climbs higher in the Mercurian sky. And this gradual shortening of shadow feels less like the erasure of mystery and more like a gentle rearranging of it, as if the same quiet landscape were simply turning one calm face after another toward the light. Mercury's strange rhythm of time continues to make this scene feel dreamlike, for it still remains a world whose year is much shorter than its day, a world in which sunrise and noon and evening are stretched out with extraordinary patience. And in this calm narration, that fact becomes a kind of comfort, a reminder that not every clock must rush, not every cycle must feel crowded, and not every day must hurry itself toward completion. Beneath the bright surface rests the dense iron heart of the planet, hidden and steady, giving Mercury its remarkable heaviness for so small a sphere. And I like to think of that hidden core now as a quiet center of poise, an inward anchor beneath the sunlit plains, a silent strength that allows the planet to remain exactly itself, while all around it, the solar system continues its wider motions. Even Mercury's faint magnetic field seems restful when imagined this way, not as a dramatic shield, but as a subtle surrounding presence, a delicate invisible influence extending outward while the planet turns in silence. And there is something soothing in that as well, the notion that even a quiet little world may carry around it an unseen gentleness, a field of quiet persistence. In some places, the bright rays around younger craters still show as pale traces over darker stone, and in the fuller light, they resemble soft brush strokes laid across an old canvas, while the wider basins appear almost architectural in their composure, as though the planet had been carefully designed as a place for contemplation rather than collision. And time has been kind enough to leave it mostly undisturbed. Far away, the permanently shadowed craters near the poles still preserve their cool, hidden ice, though we do not need to visit them again just now, because it is enough simply to remember that they are there, those little chambers of lasting shade, proof that even on a bright world there remain protected pockets of stillness. And perhaps the sleepy mind needs that reminder too, that even while thoughts brighten and fade, there can still be a cool, quiet place within where rest remains undisturbed. As we continue our smooth orbit above Mercury's patient noon, the details below become so familiar, so gentle, that they no longer feel separate at all. and instead merge into one broad feeling of serenity. The crater fields, the folded ridges, the plains of ancient fire long cooled, the clear horizon under a black sky, the immense contrast between heat and cold, held in perfect order by the planet's slow turning. You do not need to keep track of any of it now. Let Mercury simply be present, a small companion of stone and light, turning calmly beside the sun while your breathing grows slower. And the mind lets go of its need to label, compare, or remember. The beauty of a gentle bedtime is that it asks less and less from you as it goes on. And so this sleep story becomes softer not by fading away entirely, but by growing more spacious, more repetitive in the nicest way, more like the smooth rhythm of orbit itself. Below us, noon settles further over the land, the shadows becoming shorter, the plains brighter, the old craters more quietly defined, and still nothing feels sharp or demanding, because Mercury, for all its famous extremes, remains in our story a place of composed wonder, a world where science becomes atmosphere, and atmosphere becomes calm, and so we keep floating, with no need to arrive anywhere else, no need to leave this small ancient planet just yet, only drifting above its bright and silent face, while the story grows lighter in your thoughts, the words more distant, the images more dreamlike, until Mercury itself feels less like a planet you are listening about, and more like a soft and steady presence carrying you onward, slowly, peacefully, and almost imperceptibly toward sleep. As this gentle sleep story continues, let us remain beside Mercury a little longer as the planet eases into the quiet fullness of its high day. Because even now, with the sun lifted higher above the ancient horizon, nothing here feels sharp or hurried in the way it might elsewhere. And this bedtime story can still move with the same calm rhythm, the same slow and soothing breath, the same peaceful intention to help you fall asleep by letting science become softness and wonder become rest. And so we drift above the smallest planet while its surface glows with a pale, steady brilliance, crater rims brightening into delicate rings of light, smooth volcanic plains lying open and still beneath the black sky, and long contraction, scarps resting across the land like folds in old linen that have settled so deeply they no longer ask to be straightened. Below us, Mercury seems almost perfectly composed, as though the high sun has not disturbed its silence, but clarified it, revealing more fully the elegant spareness that has always belonged to this world, a spareness that feels especially comforting now, because there is so little here to distract the mind, so little to chase, so little to interpret, only stone and shadow and light arranged with ancient patience, only a quiet planet turning close to the sun while keeping its own measured dignity. The craters beneath us, which through the night were bowls of darkness, and through morning were shallow pools of gold and silver, now rest in a gentler contrast, their inner slopes softly defined, their circular forms clear but not severe, and there is something deeply relaxing in the repetition of them, one crater after another, one basin after another, as though the surface itself were repeating a lullaby in geology, a calm refrain of curve and hollow and settled dust. Between between those old impact marks, the plains formed by ancient lava appear broad and smooth, like cooled satin laid carefully between rougher patches of terrain. And it is easy to imagine that long ago Mercury was warmer within, more active, more given to slow internal movement, before the ages taught it stillness, before its outer layers cooled, and its whole body drew in slightly, leaving those graceful ridges that now catch the light so quietly. In this relaxing story, Mercury's great temperature swings are not dramatic, but meditative, part of the planet's natural breathing. And under this high sunlight, the world seems to hold warmth with calm acceptance, just as later it will release that warmth into night without resistance. And perhaps that is one of the loveliest lessons hidden inside this nighttime story. That balance does not require sameness, and peace does not require everything to remain at one constant state. Mercury can be a world of immense heat and profound cold and still feel serene, because its changes happen in long, patient arcs, because the planet never rushes its transitions, and because every phase, whether bright or shadowed, belongs fully to its nature. Deep beneath the surface rests the oversized iron core that gives Mercury its unusual density. And while we cannot see it from here, it feels present in the mood of the world, a hidden steadiness beneath the bright crust, an inward gravity that seems to hold the whole experience together, as if the little planet's true calm begins from within and rises outward into every ridge, every plain, every long-preserved crater wall. Even Mercury's faint magnetic field can be imagined now as a subtle and invisible hush surrounding the world, not dramatic, not stormy, but quietly faithful, a reminder that unseen things may still shape a place with gentleness. Far away, near the poles we visited before, the permanently shadowed craters continue to protect their stores of ice. And even though the high sun now brightens much of the surface beneath us, those hidden hollows remain cool in memory, like shaded rooms in a sunlit house. And that thought is soothing too, because it means that calm may endure even while brightness grows, and that some quiet reserves are never lost. As our orbit carries us onward, the high day over Mercury becomes less a scene to examine and more a soft state of mind, a broad whitened stillness of stone and light and endless silence. And perhaps your own thoughts may begin to resemble that landscape now. Fewer shadows of concern, fewer steep edges of attention, more open space, more smoothness, more gentle repetition. You do not need to follow every phrase in this calming narration. You do not need to remember how quickly Mercury circles the sun, or how slowly it turns, or how its surface preserves old impacts, because there is almost no weather to erase them. Those facts can simply float past like pale feathers in the mind, each one present for a moment, and then drifting onward, while the body grows heavier, the breath quieter, and the whole feeling of the story becomes warmer and more distant. This is the hour in our sleep story when Mercury feels almost ceremonial in its stillness. A small, bright world resting under a black sky, not calling out for admiration, not trying to impress, only existing with quiet confidence beside the sun. And in that confidence, there is something wonderfully safe for the tired mind. Something that says nothing urgent is required now. Nothing needs fixing. Nothing needs deciding. Only this slow companionship of ancient plains, luminous crater rims, folded hills, hidden ice, and patient turning. So let us keep floating a little longer above this bright and silent face, while the high sun washes the land in soft brilliance, and the story itself becomes lighter in your awareness, more spacious, more dreamlike, until Mercury is no longer just a planet in the imagination, but a calm white hush, a serene presence of stone and time and warmth, carrying you softly, steadily, and almost imperceptibly toward deep sleep. As this gentle sleep story continues, let us remain in our slow and peaceful orbit above Mercury as the bright stillness of high day begins, almost imperceptibly, to soften into the first hush of afternoon. Because even here, on the smallest planet, where the sun shines with unusual nearness, and the ancient ground holds the memory of immense temperature swings, the passing of hours can feel calm and spacious in this bedtime story, stretched out like a pale ribbon of light across cratered plains and folded hills. And there is something deeply soothing in watching a world do nothing more than continue to turn, continue to endure, continue to rest within its own quiet nature. Beneath us, the surface appears almost pearly now, a white gold expanse of old impact basins, smooth volcanic flats, and long contraction scarps that cross the land like delicate seams in carefully folded cloth. And the brightness does not feel harsh in this relaxing story, only clear, as if Mercury were revealing its ancient face with complete serenity, showing us the circular rims of craters, the subdued textures of cooled lava plains, and the subtle rise and fall of old terrain, without any need for drama, without any need for movement beyond the planet's own patient turning. It is lovely to imagine that for billions of years, this little world has kept such faithful silence, preserving its marks, because there is almost no atmosphere to blur them, no familiar weather to wear them down, no rain to soften an edge or wind to smooth a ridge, only sunlight, shadow, the occasional dusting touch of tiny impacts, and the long, patient breathing of heat into cold and cold into heat again. Mercury feels especially restful in this hour because the shadows beneath crater walls have shortened, the contrasts have softened, and the whole landscape seems less like a map of separate features and more like one broad field of composure, a stone sea of calm where every basin has settled into itself and every ridge accepts the light exactly as it comes. Somewhere below the bright crust rests the planet's great iron core, so large for a world so small that it lends Mercury a hidden gravity of character, a quiet inward strength, and in this nighttime story, that unseen center feels almost like a heartbeat, so slow and steady it can scarcely be called a beat at all, only a presence, an inward poise holding the whole planet together, while above it the land lies silent and sunlit. Mercury's faint magnetic field, subtle and delicate, seems to belong to that same inwardness, a nearly invisible hush extending around the planet. And it is comforting to think that even a quiet world of bare rock can possess something unseen and gentle, just as a tired mind may still hold a small inner calm, even after a busy day. As we drift onward, there are moments when the younger craters show pale rays stretched across darker ground, faint brushstrokes on an old and weatherless canvas. And there are moments when small bright hollows appear like delicate openings in the stone, reminders that Mercury, for all its age, still keeps a little freshness in places, a little brightness that feels almost tender rather than sharp. The calorous basin, far away within the memory of our journey, still belongs to this world's great preserved story. And the polar craters of permanent shadow still cradle their hidden ice beyond the brighter lands. But here in the slow white afternoon, we do not need to travel anywhere else, because this one broad orbit is enough. This one calm pass over plains and basins and ridges is enough. This one unbroken drift through scientific wonder is enough to carry the mind farther from waking thought and deeper into ease. The beauty of Mercury in a sleep story is that its facts arrive so gently when spoken this way. Mercury, the smallest planet, Mercury, a world with a day longer than its year. Mercury, a place where sunlight can blaze and darkness can freeze. Mercury, a planet dense with iron, marked by impacts, folded by cooling, and softened by time into dignity. You do not need to hold those facts now. Let them settle like dust in still air. Let them become part of the atmosphere of this calming narration, part of the gentle bedtime rhythm, part of the soft current that moves beneath the words. Below us, the horizon curves near and clear beneath a sky that remains black even in daylight. And that contrast, too, feels peaceful. Bright stone under dark space, warmth lying across an ancient world, while the stars wait invisibly beyond the sun's glare. And somehow the whole scene becomes simpler the longer we stay with it. Simpler and quieter and more dreamlike. Perhaps your thoughts are doing the same now, becoming broader, less detailed, no longer arranging themselves into lists or tasks, no longer trying to keep pace with every sentence, but drifting in wider and softer circles. Like our orbit above this quiet planet, the body grows heavier in the nicest possible way, the breath steadier, the edges of awareness gentler, and Mercury continues beneath us with the same calm patience it has always had. Its white afternoon unfolding across old crater rims, luminous plains, shallow hollows, and folded scarps, with no need to hurry toward evening. So let us remain here just a little longer in this sleep story, floating above a small, bright world that has made an art of silence, a world where science becomes comfort and distance becomes calm, a world so close to the sun and yet so full of stillness that it can cradle the imagination without effort. And as the long afternoon continues to widen below us, you may simply rest inside it, letting the story soften around you until Mercury itself becomes less a place you are hearing about and more a quiet feeling of light on stone, ancient patience, and gentle rest, carrying you onward, slowly and serenely, toward deep sleep. As this gentle sleep story continues, let us remain above Mercury while the white brightness of afternoon begins, ever so slowly, to lean toward a softer gold, because on this small and ancient planet, even the slightest change in light feels stretched across an immense and peaceful canvas. And in this bedtime story, that slow unfolding becomes a kind of comfort, a reminder that not everything in the universe rushes, not every turning is urgent, and not every day insists on being loudly lived. Beneath us, the surface of Mercury rests in broad silence, a landscape of crater rims, smooth plains, and old folded scarps that seem less like geological structures now and more like the patient lines of a sleeping face, each one settled exactly where time has placed it, each one illuminated with such calm steadiness that the eye, even in imagination, has no desire to move quickly from one feature to the next. The light has begun to mellow almost imperceptibly, and the plains below, once pale and nearly white beneath the high sun, now seem to hold a faint warmth in their color, as though the stone itself were remembering morning and preparing, without any hurry at all, for the long, graceful descent toward evening that will someday come. This is one of the soothing gifts of Mercury in a relaxing story like this one, that its famous contrasts of heat and cold, brightness and darkness, swift year and lingering day, do not feel harsh when viewed from the soft distance of imagination, but balanced, spacious, and almost musical, like a slow arrangement of tones in which each note waits kindly for the next. As our orbit carries us above old impact basins, you may imagine their floors as smooth, dark pools of silence ringed by bright stone. And those rings repeat across the landscape with such gentle regularity that they begin to resemble a lullaby written in circles, one crater following another in calm succession, one ancient bowl of shadow and light giving way to the next without interruption. Between them stretch the smoother volcanic plains, the quiet memory of a warmer Mercury long ago, when molten rock once moved across the surface before cooling into broad, settled expanses. And there is something deeply restful in that history, in the thought of a world that once glowed within, and then gradually learned stillness, gradually folded inward, gradually became composed. Mercury's contraction scarps continue to accompany us too, those long cliffs and ridges created as the planet cooled and shrank over unimaginable spans of time. And from here, they appear not severe, but graceful, like seams in carefully draped fabric, the kind of folds that invite the mind to soften rather than sharpen. Deep beneath this quiet crust lies the oversized iron core that gives Mercury its unusual density. And even though it remains unseen, its presence lends the whole world an inward feeling, a sense that calm can come from having a strong and steady center. Perhaps that is why this nighttime story can feel so grounding, because Mercury is not only a place of striking scientific fact, but also a place of inwardness, of hidden structure, of quiet strength carried without display. Around the planet extends its faint magnetic field, delicate and subtle. And in the hush of this narration, it feels almost like a soft, invisible shawl laid lightly over the little world as it turns near the sun. Far away, the permanently shadowed craters near the poles still hold their secret ice, still preserve coolness in places where the light does not reach. And it is comforting to remember them now, because even in a bright afternoon, there are hidden chambers of rest somewhere on Mercury dim rooms of the cosmos, where calm remains untouched. That thought may soothe the mind as well. The idea that even when life feels bright or full or overexposed, some inner crater of peace may still remain shaded, still able to cradle quiet. The black sky above Mercury stays unchanged by the hour, a velvet backdrop without clouds or weather. And against it, the sunlit stone below appears all the more serene, all the more self-contained, a whole world held in silence with nothing to interrupt its old and patient beauty. You do not need to remember each scientific detail now, though they may continue to pass by gently. Mercury, the smallest planet, Mercury, the world whose day is longer than its year, Mercury, dense with iron and marked by ancient impacts, Mercury, a place of hidden ice, faint magnetic grace, and wide volcanic plains resting beneath a sky that never turns blue. Let those facts drift through the mind like soft lanterns on a calm river at dusk, each visible for a moment, each lovely, each free to move on without effort. The purpose of this calming narration is not to keep you alert, but to accompany you as awareness grows softer, as thoughts lose their edges, as the body remembers it no longer needs to do anything except rest. And so we continue, floating above Mercury's restful afternoon, while the light slowly tilts, the crater rims glow with gentler warmth, the long scarps hold their quiet lines, and the planet below seems to breathe in its own planetary way, warming, turning, enduring, all with immense patience. In this sleep story, Mercury becomes less a destination and more a feeling of warm stone under a black sky, of silence preserved for billions of years, of motion so smooth it no longer feels like motion at all. And as that feeling expands around you, the story itself may begin to blur into atmosphere, into softness, into the kind of gentle bedtime hush where words matter less and less, and only the calm remains, carrying you slowly, steadily, and peacefully onward toward deep sleep. And now, as this sleep story reaches its final gentle shore, let us remain beside Mercury just a little longer, not to discover anything new, not to hurry toward any conclusion, but simply to rest in the calm we have already gathered. Because this bedtime story has never asked for effort, only presence, only soft attention, only the willingness to float beside a small and ancient planet until its silence became your silence too. And so, in this last slow passage, we drift above Mercury as the light grows tender again in the imagination, neither fully day nor fully night, but a peaceful blend of memory and hush, as if every crater, every folded ridge, every smooth volcanic plain, and every cool shadowed hollow were being wrapped in one last layer of softness before we let the whole world fade into the distance. Below us, the planet remains exactly as it has been all along, patient, modest, and dignified, its stone face carrying the story of great heat and deep cold without strain, its hidden iron heart resting far beneath the crust with steady composure, its faint magnetic grace and nearly invisible exosphere adding only the lightest whisper to a world otherwise given almost entirely to stillness. And perhaps that is why Mercury has been such a beautiful companion for a relaxing story, because because it teaches that even extremes can be held peacefully, that even a place nearest the sun can keep rooms of shadow, stores of ice, and vast reserves of quiet. Imagine now that our orbit has become so smooth, it no longer feels like movement at all. Only a gentle suspension above a silver-brown world under a velvet sky. And let that feeling enter your breathing, slow and easy, as though each inhale were a calm approach, and each exhale a soft drift farther out, farther away, farther into rest. While beneath us, the crater rims lose their sharpness and become pale rings of memory. The plains turn to broad fields of dim gold and ash, and the long scarps soften into lines almost too quiet to see, as if Mercury itself were consenting to become dreamlike, so that you may do the same. The facts that once arrived one by one have no need to stand apart now, because they can settle together into a single soothing impression. Mercury, the smallest planet. Mercury, the world of long days and brief years. Mercury, the keeper of ancient impacts, hidden polar ice, and immense temperature swings. Mercury, the little sphere of stone and metal, turning faithfully in the dark. And now all of that knowledge may loosen and grow warm and indistinct, no longer a set of details to remember, but a calm atmosphere around you, part of this nighttime story, part of this gentle bedtime, part of the soft path carrying you toward deep sleep. If any thought still lingers from the waking day, let it rest now at the edge of this quiet horizon and need nothing more from it, because Mercury asks nothing from us except witness. And even that has become lighter, gentler, softer than before, until witnessing feels almost the same as sleeping, almost the same as drifting with closed eyes through a place too peaceful to hold onto tightly. Far away, the permanently shadowed craters still cradle their secret coolness. The ancient plains still remember long-cooled fire. The hidden core still anchors the world from within. And the sun, whether rising or setting somewhere beyond our view, no longer matters very much, because the true destination of this calming narration was never morning or evening, never a particular horizon, but this feeling of release, this loosening of thought, this safe and quiet suspension in which the mind no longer tries to follow every sentence, and instead simply receives the tone of the words like distant waves on a dark shore. So let the story become quieter now, softer now, slower now, until the very idea of Mercury begins to dim at the edges, its bright ridges fading first, then its cratered basins, then its broad plains, then even its graceful little outline against space, all of it receding without sadness, without finality, only with peace, as though the smallest planet were gliding gently behind a curtain of sleep, and leaving you wrapped in the hush it offered, the hush of preserved stone, black sky, secret ice, and patient turning. You do not need to follow it any farther, and you do not need to remain awake to say goodbye, because this sleep story can continue without words now, can continue as warmth in the blankets, as heaviness in the limbs, as quiet in the chest, as a pleasant sinking inward where thoughts become softer than clouds and farther apart than stars. And if there is anything left to do tonight, it is only this: to rest, to float, to let the last little traces of the relaxing story dissolve into darkness, to let the gentle bedtime carry you fully, to let your breathing become the only rhythm you notice. And then, perhaps, not even that, only a softness, only a drifting, only the deep and wordless calm that comes when a long journey through wonder ends exactly where it hoped to end, in stillness, in safety, in sleep, with Mercury now very far away, and yet somehow still near, like a quiet ember of science and serenity, fading beautifully beyond the mind's horizon, until there is nothing left to do but fall asleep.